The entire theme of the Democratic debate last evening was who can beat Donald Trump? The question is why? Because he's withdrawing from the socialistic one world government that the elite are trying to create, and he must be stopped. Well, we'll talk about it on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. And I don't know if you were able to watch the Democratic debate last night. I've watched a few of their town halls, the one on climate change, and I think there was one on the LGBT agenda that's going on. But I haven't seen one of their debates yet. Well, last evening I got home as quick as I could after our church service. Me and Irvin Baxter were racing home to try and to watch some of this debate, because we kind of wanted to see how Mike Bloomberg would do in this Democratic debate. And of course, they were all over him last night, if you saw any of that debate. But the theme of the debate, the entire theme of that Democratic debate last evening was who can beat Donald Trump? And why are they so infatuated with that? Well, you got to look behind the scenes. If you just watch the debate, you would think that it was some Democrats that were just bantering back and forth on whose plan we should go with, and hey, pick me, that type situation. But there is so much more going on behind the scenes. The whole thing is agenda driven. They have to stop Donald Trump because Donald Trump is pulling us out of the world government that the elite are trying to create. And there are seams of that all through the debate last night. And we're going to talk about that on today's program, because we're coming up to an election cycle. And believe me, it is one of the most important election cycles that's ever occurred in America's history. So the question is, why would you want to get rid of a president? I mean, so let's look at it like this. You remember the State of the Union. According to President Trump's State of the Union, in just over 2 years since the election, there has been an unprecedented economic boom. You can feel that. I mean, I don't know where you're at in the country or around the world, but in the Dallas area, up where I live near Wiley, Texas, our gas is like $1.95, $1.96 a gallon. And so there is an economic boom. And you can feel it all throughout the United States. I had a fellow from my Bible study that I teach here on Thursday nights, and he told me that he's working, he works for a company that just, their mother company just came back from, I think he said Singapore, and is relocated in the United States because of incentives and different things that came from the Trump administration and what he has done, things he has passed. Their company came back from Singapore and relocated back here in Texas. And he was so excited because they had really slowed down. Now they've picked up and they're making all kinds of products, and he's working lots of overtime. So it was really a good deal. But that brings me to one thing real quick. I want to make an announcement. And I haven't announced this up to this point. But if you live in the Dallas area, Endtime Ministries is located, you all know where it's at, George Bush and Jupiter in Dallas. And we just put up our new sign, Endtime Ministries, endtime.com in the front. You cannot miss it if you're coming across George Bush. But I held a Bible study here every Thursday night. Tonight we start Understanding the Bible, our DVD series. Very, very enriching Bible study. So if you'd like to attend, it starts at 7 o'clock. come in the east entrance up front towards the church in the Endtime building, and I'd love to have you join us. Me and my wife Jana facilitate the Bible study every Thursday nights. We've been doing it for years, and we'd love to have you join us if you're in this area. It's an open invitation. Starts at 7 o'clock sharp. If you're there at 7 o'clock in 2 seconds, we've already started. And so I want to be respectful of your time. Okay, I just threw that in. Let's move on. During the Trump administration, why would they want to get rid of a guy who, there's this unprecedented economic boom. They created 5.3 million new jobs, added 600,000 new manufacturing jobs. Wages are rising at the fastest pace in decades. Nearly 5 million Americans have been lifted off of food stamps. The U.S. economy is growing almost twice as fast today as when Donald Trump took office. Unemployment has reached the lowest rate in over half a century. African American, Hispanic American, and Asian American unemployment have all reached their lowest levels ever recorded under this administration. Unemployment for Americans with disabilities has also reached an all-time low. More people are working now than any time in the history of our country. 157 million people are at work. They've passed a massive tax cut for working families and doubled the child tax credit, and virtually ended the estate tax, or the death tax, as it's often called, on small businesses, for ranchers, and also for families. So the question is, what's the agenda being driven here? Why try?
About our trip, it was a wonderful experience. We totally enjoyed the time spent with other believers, worshiping and experiencing the places where Christ walked. One of our favorites was being on Mount Moriah, where the Holy of Holies are, the Dome of the Spirit. And the teachings that Brother Baxter did was so enlightening. It was so much to take in. It will take us another month or two to really grasp the full extent of the knowledge we received on this trip. Our tour guide in Israel was fantastic. He was very knowledgeable. I think God chose him just for us. Thanks, Jana. Our lives will never be the same. We will try to do this tour again. Mike and Julie L., Cayman Islands.
Join us May 1st through May 16th, 2020, for a trip to the wonderful land of Israel and the Holy Roman Empire reborn.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
You know, after watching the debate last night, you've got to ask yourself, what is the agenda that's being driven that would want to get rid of a president who has, since he's been elected, eliminated the unpopular Obamacare individual mandate penalty? I mean, he's cut more regulation in a short period of time than any other administration during his entire tenure. And companies are coming back into our country in large numbers thanks to these historic reductions in taxes and regulations. And we've unleashed a revolution in our American energy. I mean, the United States is now, according to the Trump, the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world. And now, for the first time in 65 years, we are a net exporter of energy. And then, of course, after 24 months of the rapid progress, Our economy is the envy of the entire world, and our military is the most powerful on the earth by far. So again, why would you want to get that guy out of office? The entire debate last night, if you listen to it, was devoted to get this guy out of office. One of us on the stage, who's the best guy or lady to replace this Trump? Well, it's called an agenda. You say, well, I didn't really see the agenda. Well, let's look at a few excerpts from last night's debate, because believe me, what they're trying to do here is very prophetic. And I'll get to that later on in the program. So if you look at a couple sections of the debate, let's talk about global warming and climate change. How do these individuals that stood on the stage, how do they feel? Have they bought into the United Nations propaganda, this hoax of global warming, human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change? Or do they recognize and they're honest with themselves and with their constituents that, yes, it is a hoax? Well, I can tell you now, they've all bought into it. I mean, Joe Biden said it's an existential threat that humanity faces, global warming. He said, on day one, when I'm elected president, I'm going to invite all the members of the Paris Accord to Washington, D.C. And all of them have said that they would enter us back into the Paris Accord. Bloomberg said, but let's just start at the beginning. If you're president, the first thing you do in the first day is to rejoin the Paris Agreement, the Paris Climate Accord. That, he said, that is just ridiculous for us to drop out of that. Bernie Sanders says, what I tell these workers is that the scientists are telling us that if we don't act incredibly boldly and within the next 6-7 years, there will be an irreparable damage done not just in Nevada or in Vermont or Massachusetts, but to the entire world. So these guys have all bought into this, obviously. I mean, Bernie Sanders said, Joe Biden said it right. This is an existential threat. And you know what that means? He's talking to Chuck Todd. That means we're fighting for the future of this planet. We're not relying upon, he didn't say this, but this is Dave Robbins. If I'd have been in the debate, this is what I would have said. What about God? You think God can't sustain the planet? Maybe it's too hard of a job for him. But no, we need to look at humanistic solutions. Folks, God has everything in control. Relax. If you watched the debate last night, just relax. Take a deep breath, because God's got everything under control. Okay, moving on. Sorry about that. Klobuchar said, this is a crisis, and a lot of our plans are very similar to get a carbon neutral by 2045 or 2050, something like that, she says. But when it comes to putting a price on carbon, she's talking about a carbon tax, this is very important. She's bought in lock, stock, and barrel. She said, I've got a plan to get us carbon neutral by 2050. And she said, and I think everybody up here has a plan that more or less does the same. Of course, Elizabeth Warren, she said, yes, we can have a Green New Deal. And Buttigieg said, Buttigieg, I guess that's how you pronounce it, let's be real about the deadline. It's not 2050, it's not 2040, it's not 2030, it's 2020. Because if we don't elect a president who actually believes in climate science now, we will never meet any of the other scientific or policy deadlines that we need to. But I want you to note here, everybody, according to the Washington Post and many other sources, every single candidate that participated in last evening's Democratic debate would rejoin the United States to the Paris Climate Agreement. You say, well, so what? I mean, who really cares? I watched the debate. I thought it was pretty awesome, and I got a lot out of it. You need to understand what the Paris Climate Agreement is, and the reason they're talking about rejoining us to that is because Donald Trump withdrew us from the Paris Climate Agreement. Who cares, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, I want to explain that to you. The Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, they are twin efforts designed specifically to govern the planet. It's an effort towards world government. One without the other is pointless. The Sustainable Development Goals were unanimously adopted by all 193 members of the United Nations in September of 2015. Now, you were not told this in the debate last night. Of course, on purpose. It's agenda-driven, everybody. And it's all very prophetic. The United Nations Global Governing Plan is called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And according to the United Nations' own website, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets demonstrate the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals are an effort by the United Nations to control every aspect of every person's life on the planet, you and I, not China and Russia and the European Union. They want the American people to be under this dictatorial edicts of a set of edicts. Not going to happen. And so, but there are people who are okay with this, okay? When I'm talking about the agenda that's being driven, there are people in America that want to sign us back onto the Paris Climate Accord and keep us in the Sustainable Development Goals. So one of the main areas of this is of critical importance is the planet itself. And according to this 2030 agenda, and I'm quoting, they said, we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. So this is the reason for the Paris Climate Agreement. The human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, is a hoax. They need you to get in fear mode to push world government on you. When you get down to the crux of it, that's what it is. People that have bought into this, if they're either agenda-driven or they're not educated enough to really understand what's going on. So without a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse emissions, it's impossible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, on January 18th back in 2016, during his opening remarks at the Abu Dhabi Action Day, former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said the Paris Agreement was adopted just after the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. They were adopted in September of 2015. The Paris Climate Agreement was signed in December of 2015. And Ban Ki-moon said that these are twin plans for transformative progress. The Sustainable Development Goals are the vision, climate change, and this climate commitment that's the commitment. The Paris Climate Agreement is the commitment for nations to give money towards this and to commit to do away with so much carbon emissions and this, that, and the other. Even though, everybody, this is all based on a hoax. And so this vision and commitment should go hand in hand. They're part of this grand design. And that these should complement each other. Ban Ki-moon said if we don't implement the climate change agreement, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, all of these 17 goals, which is this socialistic effort by the United Nations, it's their blueprint to govern the world. Ban Ki-moon said that they will not be fully implemented if we don't have the Paris Climate Agreement and these commitments. So now you can understand the importance of Donald Trump's withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. It's a socialistic blueprint to govern every person on the planet. But yet every Democratic candidate during they all advocated going back into they have all advocated going back into the Paris Climate Agreement pretty much on day one when they enter office. And they all agreed to or have bought into this human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change and the scare tactics that go along with that hoax. And they talked about it last night in the debate. But if you don't understand the agenda behind it and what Donald Trump did, you would think, well, they're all just kind of bantering back and forth, for positioning themselves to be the Democratic presidential candidate. There's so much more going on in the debate behind the scenes. These people are puppets driving an agenda. And you say, wow, Dave, that's strong. That's a pretty strong statement. Listen, I would love to have every one of them individuals in a Bible study and teach them prophecy and the gospel and set everybody straight here on these agendas and what's going on and what the end time world government is and all these different things that are going to happen. And what the Antichrist kingdom in the end will be a socialistic one world governing body. I would hope that they would back off of that if they knew the Bible and understood the prophecies. But what I'm doing is educating you. You're not going to get this from the news, major news sources. You're not going to get this from college. Most churches are not talking about this. Some radio programs are talking about it from a political standpoint, not from a prophetic, here's what's coming in light of Bible prophecy type situation. That's my goal here today, is to show you that this agenda that's being driven is very prophetic, and we're in the end times. I mean, this stuff, you would have never had an open socialist trying to be elected president 25, 30 years ago. They may have had socialistic ideas, but they never would have said, I am a democratic socialist. No way. So that's human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change in last night's debate. The second one I want to cover is socialism. I mean, you've got an avowed socialist who, having looked at some of the information that I've seen over the last few days, is a socialist leaning towards communist, if not a full communist, at least advocates a lot of those principles. And they're both right along the same thing. One of them leads to the other. It's all about governmental control and a few select group of individuals running the populace. And so we talked about socialism last night in the debate. Bloomberg said, now you remember Bloomberg and Bernie Sanders going back and forth at each other because they were all hammering Bloomberg for being this multi-billionaire and buying himself into the campaign. And then Bernie Sanders, who is a millionaire, attacks him for being too rich. Now think about that. And Bloomberg said, well, it's ridiculous. We're not going to throw out capitalism. We tried. Other countries have tried that. It's called communism. And it just didn't work. I was eating lunch with Irvin Baxter today, and I said, they were talking about that last night, and I said, that statement right there will keep Mike Bloomberg from being the Democratic presidential candidate. He doesn't want to implement socialism in the United States, and many of them have adopted that because there are people that are very influential that are trying to implement socialism and eventually communism here in the United States. And I talked to Irvin at lunch, and I said, that right there that one statement could keep Mike Bloomberg from being the Democratic presidential candidate. And let me just interject this here, because a lot of you have been asking, where's Irvin Baxter? And then I'll jump back into this. Irvin Baxter we put out part 1 of the Revelation commentary series. Irvin Baxter has taken kind of a sabbatical from radio, daily radio, to finish part 2. He's got to write the book. He's got to produce all the DVDs and shoot them, which is very time-consuming. And so he took a sabbatical from radio. He's writing the book, doing the DVDs, and once we get that done, he'll jump back on and we'll jump back into our normal rotation. He'll do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'll do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's where he's at. He's not sick. He's feeling wonderful. He's bouncing around here like a 20-year-old. But he's got some work to do that's not radio related, and I'm sure y'all can understand that. So, during socialism part of the debate last night, he says that, Mike Bloomberg, it's called communism, it just doesn't work. Well, Lester Holt, one of the moderators, said, Senator Sanders, our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll released yesterday, said that 2/3 of all voters said that they were uncomfortable with a socialist candidate for president. What do you say to those voters, sir? Well, he didn't say, I'm not a socialist. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, they would have said, socialist, what are you talking about? He didn't say that. He said, well, what was the result of the poll? Who was winning? And Holt said, the question is to you, and you being a socialist. And Sanders said, well, but here's the point. Let's talk about democratic socialism, not communism, Mr. Bloomberg. He said that was a cheap shot. But he said we're living in many ways in America in a socialist society right now. He said, I believe in democratic socialism for working people, not billionaires, even though he's standing there a millionaire. He said, and health care for all, which is a socialistic principle, educational opportunities for all, creating a government that works for all, not just for Mr. Bloomberg. Well, socialistic principles is for people working for the government. So what he's saying there is kind of contradictory to what he believes. Lester Holt said, well, the question is about socialism. To which Bloomberg replied, well, Bloomberg looked at Sanders and Holt and said, what a wonderful country we have. The best known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What did I miss here? So you understand what's going on here. We're talking about a socialist that said, hey, I'm a democratic socialist. He's one of the leading candidates. You realize in the last election, it ended up being him and Hillary Clinton. Well, now he's one of the leading candidates, if not being in the lead, for the current presidential candidate, Democratic presidential candidate. And he's an avowed socialist. And so, but a lot of what the other candidates are advocating are socialistic principles as well. So a lot of agenda-driven stuff going along in last night's debate. And we'll talk about some of the prophetic aspects when we get back.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
About our trip, it was a wonderful experience. We totally enjoyed the time spent with other believers, worshiping and experiencing the places where Christ walked. One of our favorites was being on Mount Moriah, where the Holy of Holies are, the Dome of the Spirit. And the teachings that Brother Baxter did was so enlightening. It was so much to take in. It will take us another month or two to really grasp the full extent of the knowledge we received on this trip. Our tour guide in Israel was fantastic. He was very knowledgeable. I think God chose him just for us. Thanks, Jana. Our lives will never be the same. We will try to do this tour again. Mike and Julie L., Cayman Islands.
Join us May 1st through May 16th, 2020, for a trip to the wonderful land of Israel and the Holy Roman Empire reborn.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
You know, everybody, when we talk about socialism, the reason I talk about socialism so much and world government, things like that, world government is one of my favorite Bible prophecy topics to talk about. I stay up on that all the time, write a lot of articles on it and different things, and talk about it a lot on the radio, is because that's one of the main things that Christians will have to contend with and resist in the end time. The socialistic one world governing body of the Antichrist, even around the world. We deal with, obviously, with I don't know how many people here in the United States, but I'm also dealing with Christians and pastors and missionaries and people all over the world that contact us here at Endtime Ministries. And so when I talk about some of these things, I'm sharing with them not just socialistic principles here in the United States, where we have a huge block of people fighting that, but people that live in socialistic countries already. They need to resist that as much as they can. You say, well, Dave, that's hard. Their government's already down that path and has implemented that there. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people are not educated here in America and around the world on socialistic principles. I mean, if it got to be very socialistic in a place around the world, I may not stay there if it were me. Because those things, imagine a Mao Zedong, a Stalin, and all these guys being over your nation. I know some of you live under those kind of situations now. We've got reports from some of that. You know, I'm just educating you on what the prophecies say, that the end-time world governing body of the Antichrist will be a socialistic one world governing body. And in talking about Sanders, going back to him as far as being socialist, there was a video put out. I can't remember whether I saw it on Fox News, The Blaze, CNS News. I can't remember which one. But there was a surrogate at Bernie Sanders' rally that exclaimed, we need one of the presidential campaign rallies Bernie Sanders was at. They actually got in the microphone and said, we need a powerful socialist movement to end all capitalism. So this was a socialist member on the Seattle City Council, and they were speaking at a rally Monday for Senator Bernie Sanders in Tacoma, Washington. And it really dispelled any doubts that Sanders and his supporters ardently support socialism and desire to implement it in the United States, because this lady said, well, we need a powerful socialist movement to end all capitalist oppression and exploitation. And the crowd went crazy. Thunderous applause at a Bernie Sanders rally. So yes, there are thousands of people here in the United States that are pro-socialist. And I mean, what else can you say? I tell you what, many of you are connected with me on my Facebook. Go to my Facebook, or you can go to Fox News. I think it's several places. I know Fox News has it, of a lady that came out of, she's an activist here in the United States. She's been in the United States since '95. She came from China, I believe, and she has a video, I think it's on Fox News right now, of coming out of, she gives a testimony of coming out of a socialistic regime and the dangers of that and the dangers of voting for somebody like a Bernie Sanders. Seems like a nice guy and talks, you would think, well, I'm Bernie Sanders, not that bad of a guy. But this lady says there's a lot of dangers associated with an individual like that, putting them in as a president over a country, especially like one of the most thriving economies on the planet, the United States of America. Imagine them being in control of the largest, most powerful military on the planet. It could wreak havoc for it. And so imagine a socialist being over our economy, the one that's booming right now and rolling, and just, it's like a hockey stick right now. And so you got to think about that when you think about voting, when you think about what kind of America do we want to live in. Now, The Federalist. I republished this article in our magazine a while back. The Federalist, a lady wrote an article, Stella Morbato or something like that. She wrote an article, Socialism's Bloody History Shows Millennials that they should think twice before supporting it. So she said this, and I'll go through this pretty quickly because I want to get into some of the prophecy aspects of this. But she said, because the reason I want to make sure you get it is because you're not going to get this on your nightly news. Most people are not talking about this unless it's a conservative radio talk show or a conservative publication that you might get. Because a lot of people are being suppressed and censored. And that's another thing we're going to be talking to you about on Monday. Myself and Irvin's grandson, Vince Stegall, will be in here on Monday talking to you about a new platform that we are getting involved with that will keep us from being censored. It's going to be really cool, and I know you're going to want to be involved in it. But I'll talk to you again about that on Monday, because I believe that's when it's launching. And I'll be asking him some questions on the air, doing an interview. It's going to be really cool. But about socialism. Socialism, she says, demands that we place blind trust in whoever takes the power to distribute society's goods and services. And so history shows that those who have this power abuse it in horrific ways. Now, it's not sold to you like that. It's sold to you as free college, free health care, free this, free that, blah, blah, blah. And then when they get in power and you can't take that power back, boom, that's when you have socialism, communism. That's what it looks like. So socialism, she says, by the way, is that system. This is the case of whether you call it by any other name, whether you call it communism, utopianism, collectivism. So she says, oh, and go ahead and slap some lipstick on that pig and call it democratic socialism or progressivism. You've heard these people lately say, well, I'm a progressive. Same thing. Or communitarianism. You know, did you know this? Vladimir Lenin and all of his gang all started out calling themselves socialist, or even social democrats to be exact. Did you know that? It's not how it starts out, everybody, it's how it ends up. So the fact remains, the path of socialism is ultimately paved by coercion, censorship. We're feeling that here at Endtime Ministries already. I'll be talking to you about that on Monday. And yes, terror. You know, socialism is a bait and switch scheme. Socialism and communism both involve ceding to the state control over distribution of goods and services for the masses, i.e., maybe like Obamacare. And this involves giving up individual rights, giving up the state a good measure of control over our personal lives. For example, if you've ever heard of the Jacobin magazine, it's a socialist magazine. And they actually said when Obama tried to modestly alleviate Americans' economic suffering, as with the Affordable Care Act, he was met with untempted scaremongering about a socialist takeover. People saw it as a big wealth redistribution scheme, a lot of different things. But this, and I'm quoting from the Jacobin magazine, a socialist magazine, this despite the fact that the Affordable Care Act was actually designed to preserve the private insurance industry. Get this, unlike its more socialist cousin, Medicare for All, which replaces that industry with a universal tax-funded social program. But if you remember, some of the Democrats in last evening's Democratic debate were questioned on their Medicare for All plans. This is agenda-driven, everybody. What happened last night, a lot of it was agenda-driven. Stella goes on to say that socialism is a road that always leads to tyranny, no matter what you pave it with and no matter what you name it. Socialism requires a powerful clique. Are you familiar with the clique in the United States? The establishment? We've talked about it many times here on the air. And as Vladimir Lenin put it back then, an elite vanguard, in order to pretend to function like the shadowy type bunch of individuals, this elite, these globalist elite. They're shadowy. Many of you don't even know their name. They're working behind the scenes. And this means going heavy on executive power and rubber stamp light on the legislative. And then socialism demands that we place blind trust in whoever takes the reins of power to distribute society's goods and services. And this tiny elite, by the way, typically enjoys enormous privileges and a much higher standard of living. Imagine a millionaire socialist who has 3 homes saying, I will work for you, middle class, and We need to redistribute wealth. But many times, almost every time, none of those individuals are willing to redistribute their wealth. And sure, this oligarchy claims to distribute in the name of equality, and that's typically the cover story. That's what they were getting on Mike Bloomberg about. But the historical fact is that the vanguard, this powerful clique, eventually takes control of everything that is produced. Medicine, education, housing, food, transportation. Remember the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And its members then bureaucratically ration out as they see fit the means of human survival. I mean, they're saying, hey, the billionaires make too much money. We should take some of their money. When they say we're going to tax them, we should take some of their money and give to the populace. This is what they're wanting to do. So in the end, you basically have an elite core of mobsters with the power to decide which folks are more equal than others. They want to equal out the playing field. Socialism also has a way of producing bloated bureaucracies that in turn produce ever greater scarcity. And along the way, look at some of the countries that have socialism working in them today. Going to the sewers and trying to get food, garbage cans, and sewers to try to get some type of water to drink. It's horrible. But along the way, this produces even more corruption and cronyism. Censorship puts down deep roots because its dissent cannot be tolerated or the system would collapse. And those are all prime ingredients for a closed society and a surveillance state, i.e. China. Yet everybody is supposed to lay back and enjoy this new experience. So I would say, everybody, for a Bernie Sanders or a socialistic candidate, be careful what you wish for. Socialism is well-trod path to absolute power. And somehow a lot of folks have missed the memo that a system without checks and balances on political power is conducive to creating power mongers and even monsters. I mean, Lord Acton famously said, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We need to remember that when soft socialism with its siren song of equality is left to its own devices, it takes ever more rigid forms. This political hubris of the progressives who know better than you and me and with such utter certainty always leads to central control, corruption, cronyism, censorship, and abject conformity. It's very important that we understand these principles, everybody, because we have an election coming up in November.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-END-TIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
You know, let me wrap this up about socialism and go into some prophecy here. You know, if you've studied this at all, the more than 100 million victims of communism, it really shows just how slippery a slope socialism is. I mean, any person of goodwill who is familiar with the history and realities of socialism would do everything possible to avoid going down that minefield of a road. The problem is that a lot of younger people, the younger generation, they do not understand really what has happened over the last century under those regimes. So perhaps we should train them and teach them outside of the colleges that aren't doing that. And that's the reason for these radio programs. And hopefully, I know you listen to other conservative programs and read conservative publications that are teaching about these things. Get your kids and your the millennial generation and the younger ones, explain to them history, the true history of what's going on. Because just because you're being sold free things, free, those are nothing is free, everybody. Nothing. It's very important you understand that. They're wanting to offer you something free, but it's trillions of dollars that's going to increase our debt, a lot of different things. Bernie Sanders doesn't even know how he's going to pay for all this free health care that he wants to give out. So, need to understand these things. Now, Donald Trump, he's made this statement famous. America will never be a socialist nation. Why would you want to get rid of an individual like that? Why are the Democrats so worried about Donald Trump? Because remember, it's agenda driven. Donald Trump is against socialism, against one world government. And it's the same reason the international community, the whole reason for the debate last night, we need to get rid of Donald Trump. It's the same reason the international community is worried about Donald Trump. I mean, think about it. Irvin Baxter and I take, I don't know how many publications here at Endtime Ministries. And I'm holding in a foreign affairs magazine that's put out by the Council on Foreign Relations. And the magazine is devoted to, if you're watching me on live stream, you can see the front of it. It says, "Come home, America." Well, what's it talking about? Well, under the Donald Trump administration, he has, in many ways, pulled us out of the one world governing body. And because from all the way from World War II until now, the United States has been the leader of this one world governing body. Donald Trump is pulling us out of that in many ways, which is exactly what the Bible says is going to happen. This magazine is devoted to saying, America, come back into this one world governing body. We need you back in. They know, as well as we do, that we're going into an election campaign here. And so they're saying, America, come back. If you get rid of Donald Trump, a socialist leader will bring you back in. Remember, I said the Democrats are all about joining us back onto the Paris Climate Agreement. And now I've told you how important it is that we stay out of that. And this magazine is devoted to, it says on the very front, America, come home. Come back into this trap of world government. It's put out by the Council on Foreign Relations. They were designed, and what they want to do is to turn this nation into to get us involved in and to yield up our sovereignties into this socialistic one world governing body. This whole magazine is devoted to that. So, you say, well, it's prophesied. Where'd you get that? Well, America is prophesied to exit from the end-time socialistic one-world governing body. I mean, global elites, they have been for decades working to create a world government. And the goal of that is so all-inclusive and minutely detailed that it would control all aspects of every person's life. And the intention is to eventually regulate like I talked about before, in socialism, all individual production and consumption patterns, how much electricity you use, what kind of food you eat, everything in the name of sustainability, with the ultimate objective of thought manipulation, resulting in absolute obedience and allegiance. I mean, if I'm the government and I can control what you eat, what you produce, whether you can buy a car, whether you can work a job, I control you to the nth degree, because all I have to do is invalidate your number. You see where I'm going? Precursors to the mark of the beast. That's where this stuff is all headed. And that's why I asked the question many times on the air, what kind of country do you want to live in? And I've either read this recently or somebody in the debate last night said that they believe this will be the largest turnout of voters ever in the history of America. I hope so. Because I know what country I want to live in. And you say, is every candidate out there, Republican and Democrat, perfect? I don't know of any of them that are perfect. But I know kind of which direction some of them are headed in. And if I have to choose between one of the two, I know which way I'm going. I mean, it's like a no-brainer to me. But in talking about the world government, the outcome of these efforts is the formation of an international institutions specifically designed to govern the world. You know of most of them. You've heard of them. The United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, International Criminal Court, which is looking into Israel right now and the Palestinians. You've heard about that. And so the World Bank, the World Health Organizations, you hear about them all the time in the news, but you really don't understand what they're designed to do. It's to govern the planet. The World Trade Organization, the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, they're all designed to govern the planet, not to govern the United States of America or China or Russia or Israel, the globe, world government. It's the New World Order. And so the whole goal for my program is to bring you to this point. The kingdom of the Antichrist is going to be a socialistic one-world governing body. The Bible prophesies about an end-time world government. Revelation 13, 1 through 8. It describes this end-time world government and its rulers as the beast. And along with the spiritual leader, or the spiritual being from which they derive their power. Satan, the Bible says the dragon, Revelation 13, 2, the dragon gives him his seat, power, and great authority. The devil is behind all of this. He's the agenda driver. And he has minions that work for him. And all of these efforts toward a world governing body, the agenda is Satan. That's why it's so corrupt. It's all built on a lie. In other words, the human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, it's a lie. It's a hoax. The world has been heating up and cooling down ever since God created this planet. God's in control of all of that. I can't control it, neither can you. Neither can all the scientists and governments on the planet. God is in control. Period. But a humanist, they don't believe that. They believe humans can create problems and humans can solve problems and this, that, and the other. I mean, on like a global scale. Imagine trying to control the weather or whether the earth heats up and cools down. It's never going to happen from a human. God does that. God designed the sun and the ocean and this earth to heat up and cool down and this, that, and the other. God's designed all that. But when you take God out of the equation, then, hey, I want to be in control. I can control people by getting them in fear mode. And if I can get them scared enough and in a perpetual state of fear, I can control them. So the United Nations is using that ideology to say, okay, here's our propaganda. The earth is heating up to the point where it's going to burn up. We're already seeing it whenever we have an earthquake or a hurricane or a flood or a fire somewhere. Even though those things have been happening for thousands of years, but now human-induced global warming is leading to those climate change climate events. And so there you go. That's the scare tactics, because you sit back and think, because this factory down the street is putting off too much carbon emission, then we're causing this. We're the instigators of all of this. And that's what Klobuchar and some of them are talking about, carbon taxes. They've all bought into this human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change. This comes from the seat of world government in the earth today, the United Nations. This United Nations, the European Union, this world governing body that they're establishing, this was prophesied about 2,500 years ago. Actually, the European Union and the revived Holy Roman Empire back in the book of Daniel, but it also prophesies a world governing situation that would occur at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ over in Revelation 13. when John wrote that on the wrote the book of Revelation on the Isle of Patmos. So our understanding of this prophecy of this one world governing body, like I said, begins back in the book of Daniel. Daniel 7. Daniel was given 4 beasts: a lion with eagle's wings, a bear, a 4-headed leopard, and a 10-horned beast. And those 10-horned beasts, which were separate beasts in Daniel 7, are morphed into a world governing body in Revelation chapter 13. The Bible says that had the body of a leopard, feet of the bear, mouth of the lion, the 10 horns of the 10-horned beast. It's a 7-headed 10-horned beast in Revelation chapter 13. You say, well, how do you know it is socialistic? Because that's what we're talking about here. Well, the Bible says over in Revelation 17:3, that there was a woman sitting on the back of a scarlet-colored 7-headed 10-horned beast. The 7-headed 10-horned beast is the world government mentioned in Revelation 13, but in that it gives us one more clue. It says it's a scarlet-colored beast. Scarlet, another word for red. So it's a red beast. Red in Bible prophecy. We know that from other prophecies, Revelation chapter 6, verse 1 through 8, that red symbolizes socialism or communism in the end time, in end time Bible prophecy. So when the Bible says, what's the 7-headed 10-horned beast again? It's world government. What is in Revelation 17, the 7-headed 10-horned beast is what color? It's red. And so the end time world governing bodies is going to be a socialistic, communistic, one world governing body ran by the Antichrist. Now, jump back to last night's Democratic debate. There you have an avowed socialist, and many of them that are, would I say they were avowed socialists? No. Have they bought into some of the world governing edicts and platforms? Yes. But when you talk about a socialist or if somebody calls themselves a progressive or a collectivist, anything like that, they're headed in that direction. When somebody, a socialist, I mean, they're not even trying to hide it anymore, then you know what we're talking about here. And it helps you in future decisions. What kind of country do we want to live in? The Bible says that the Antichrist kingdom will be a socialistic, one world governing body. When I heard the Democratic debate last night, I thought, my goodness, we're headed right into this thing. We've been in it for years, but I mean, there's just people talking about it right out in the open if you know the agendas to watch for behind the scenes.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.